Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Today we're talking about something about mixing babies in the hospital.
Ooh.
And the title of our article is...
You mean mixing up babies in a hospital?
Yeah, I guess you can't really mix them up like there's some kind of drink or something.
No.
Yes, they're mistaking one baby for another. They get switched. And sometimes this might be on purpose. Maybe you've seen that in the movie or something where somebody wants a certain kind of kid and somebody sneaks in and switches the babies around. But we're talking about babies that get switched because of human error. We've got nurses who have to take care of all these babies. And as you know, nurses work extremely hard.
They're very hardworking people.
They work long hours and stuff like that. So, it's inevitable that someone's going to make a mistake. And we're talking about a particular incident in Japan where a Japanese truck driver actually sued the hospital because they switched him at birth. He had to live a really poor life as a result of this. If they had not made that mistake, he would have grown up in a rich family.
Well, beyond the money factor, I think the most important thing here is he didn't get to grow up with his family.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this interesting story, the mistake of a lifetime. We're going to start, of course, by reading through our article, and then we'll be back to talk about it. In 2013, a Japanese truck driver sued a hospital for making a huge error and was compensated 32 million yen. What he really wanted, however, was for the hospital to be able to turn back the clock to the day he was born in 1953. On that day, the hospital made an unforgivable mistake, switching the unnamed man with another baby born on the same day. The two men then went on to lead contrasting lives. The truck driver grew up in a poor family in a one-room apartment. The woman who he thought was his mother had to look after the family alone when her husband passed away. The man studied at night school while working long hours in a factory. He now cares for his non-biological brothers, one of whom has suffered a stroke. Meanwhile, the baby that took his place lived a privileged life. The truck driver's biological family was wealthy enough to afford private tutors and other luxuries. The 60-year-old error was discovered when the truck driver's real brothers called for a DNA test on their elder brother after their parents died. They had been suspicious as their elder brother looked nothing like them. However, out of respect for their parents, they waited until their parents passed away. Upon learning the truth, the truck driver was astonished. "I wondered how on earth this could happen," he said. Seeing photos of his biological parents still makes him cry, especially as both are dead and he never got to meet them. Happily, his biological brothers contacted him and said that they should make up for lost time. "I was happy to hear that, and I want to do it," the man said.
Okay, it's time now to discuss our article in detail, so please pay attention. And let's first look at the title here. It says, The Mistake of a Lifetime. Oftentimes we talk about, say, the experience of a lifetime or a memory of a lifetime, something that you'll only see once in your life. It's really a great thing. This is the chance of a lifetime. Don't pass it up, otherwise you'll regret it later. So here we're talking about a mistake that changed someone's entire life. It was the mistake of a lifetime. Let's talk about this particular case. Going back to 2013, like 3 years ago, a Japanese truck driver sued a hospital for making a huge error and was compensated 32 million yen. Yen, of course, is the money in Japan. And if you sue someone for something, that means you take them to court because they did something bad to you and you want some form of compensation. Sue here does mean that you sort of start a lawsuit against someone else. Hey, you crashed into me and now I can't work, so I'm going to sue you for millions of NT dollars.
Yeah, and if you compensate somebody, it means means you give somebody something to make up for some loss or suffering or maybe an injury that you caused them. For example, if you hit somebody and you really hurt them badly in an accident, then you usually, if it's your fault, you have to compensate them for their suffering, for maybe the injury. Some of the people that get injured in accidents are hurt for the rest of their lives. Maybe their back breaks and they can't walk again, things like that. So if you compensate, you pay someone for some sort of loss or suffering. Now, what he really wanted, however, was not just the money. He wanted a hospital that he sued to kind of turn back the clock to the day he was born in 1953. What happened on that really awful day he was born? The hospital made an unforgivable mistake. They switched him with another baby, and they went on to lead very different lives. Now, when something's unforgivable, it just means something was done that you really can never say, I forgive you, or it's okay, I'm not mad at you anymore. Kind of unforgivable because it changed his entire life. He wasn't able to grow up with his real family, his parents and his brothers. And when you switch something, you change one thing for something else. Sometimes you might have a coworker that wants to take the night off, and maybe you switch schedules with them and you work their schedule and they'll work yours. Here, they actually switched babies. Sometimes it does happen in hospitals when things get really busy.
Indeed, and notice here switch is used with the preposition with to switch something with something else. You could also switch something to something else. That means you change it from one thing to another. But in this case, they change places. So the hospital switched the unnamed man with another baby born on the same day. We don't know this guy's name, or maybe he doesn't want us to know his name. We can understand that. It doesn't matter anyway. We don't really know Japanese here. But in any case, they were switched way back in 1953, which was, over maybe 60 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So even the nurses on duty then are probably retired now or even dead, and the doctors are probably gone. So I guess he just wants the hospital to admit that they made this mistake. It's more about, maybe an apology or something.
Well, he did get money.
Yeah, the money's nice, of course, but he probably still wants some kind of understanding and stuff like that. And the two men then went on to lead contrasting lives. So here, contrasting means that things are opposite. They are very much different, okay? To contrast as a verb means to compare things that are opposite. Contrast as a noun refers to the difference between black and white. Maybe sometimes you take a picture and the contrast is too low, it looks too muddy or too gray, so you can take it into Photoshop and increase the contrast and make it a little more pleasing. So here they led very opposite, very contrasting lives.
So let's talk about the truck driver who went ahead and sued the hospital. He grew up in a poor family in a one-room apartment. So it was a pretty small place that he grew up in, and the woman he thought was his mom, of course, wasn't. She had to look after the family alone because her husband passed away. So if a woman's husband passes away, we call her a widow. And if a husband has a wife who passes away first, he's called a widower. You may not have heard of that before. Well, the man, of course, studied at night school. And while he was studying at night school, he was working really long hours during the day in a factory. This actually sounds like my father. He grew up in a poor family, and he went to law school at night and worked during the daytime to pay for his schooling because his family didn't have any money. Well, what's he doing now? Well, in his current life, he's caring for his non-biological brothers, one of whom has suffered a stroke. If you're talking about non-biological, it means you don't share the same DNA, you could say. So they're not even related, of course, but he grew up with these men and they're family to him. So they're not sharing that same set of parents. That's what this means. Now, if you suffer a stroke, it means, I guess we could say the veins in your head become too small and can be kind of scary if you suffer a stroke. Sometimes it affects your ability to move your body. Maybe one side of your body is paralyzed. My mom had a small stroke before it was about, I think, 15, 20 years before she passed away. And she started saying weird things. She thought she was making sense when she was talking, but my sister, who was there with her when it happened, she looked at her and she took her to the hospital immediately because it sounded like my mom was speaking a foreign language.
That's a sure symptom of a stroke.
Yeah.
A stroke in Chinese is zhongfeng. It's kind of hard to explain in English, so we're just going to say the Chinese stroke. So, you could say someone had a stroke or they suffered a stroke.
Yeah. Well, this was his life, and it sounds pretty hard. He didn't have an easy life growing up. So now we're going to compare and contrast the life that his real biological family were living at the same time he was living a tough life.
Indeed. I think we'll wait till after our break to start talking about the other person who lived a privileged life. So let's stop right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. 今天我们要看的是第2单元。人生里面呢，总会犯错，但是这个错误呢，实在是非常的离谱。我们要来看一下这是怎么样的错。先看这个主人公，他是一位日籍的卡车司机，那他要控告一家医院犯下了重大的过失。我们先看控告。当你要提出告诉，好，这里有一个动词是 sue, S-U-E， 控诉谁，控告谁，为了什么原因？后面的介系词呢是用 for， 所以这里 sued a hospital for making a huge error。再来，他说到这个错，当然他控告之后的确获得了3200万的日元。不过呢，他真正想要的并不一定是钱，而是希望这个医院可以 turn back the clock。 好， turn back the clock， 这跟他字面的解释完全一样，把时光倒转。那事情也就是在1953年，那时候呢，医院呢竟然把2个婴儿调换了，也就是这一位日籍的卡车司机，当时跟他同一天出生的另外婴儿2个被调换了，所以就过着2个不同的人生了。我们先看这里有个动词 switch 当然是交换，那你说跟谁交换？后面的介系词是 with。 那我们继续来看这2个命运怎么样的截然不同。首先呢，他就说这位卡车司机他就生长在穷苦人家的单房公寓里，当然这不是他的亲生母亲，可是他一直以为那是他的亲生母亲。这里句构稍微复杂一些，我们看一下这个句子啊，从 the woman 开始，后面有一个 who 的子句， who he thought was his mother had to look after the family alone。 到这边为止，提到这个女士呢，她原先以为那是她的母亲，所以这个 he thought 她夹在这里，其实呢是 he thought the woman was his mother。 好，所以说起来这个 the woman 在这一句是它的先行词，用冠带 who 来取代，而这个 who 在这个关系子句里面其实是受词。文法之外，我们再来往下看，刚刚这个句子啊，当然是很长，但是呢，它句子还没有结束哦。他后面说，当时因为他的爸爸已经过世了，所以母亲必须独自抚养全家人。当时呢，他读着夜校，而且还要在工厂工作。那他现在还要照顾他那非亲生的兄弟。好，我们先看这个字，非亲生的。好，在英文上用到 non-biological。当我们说到你的亲生母亲、亲生父母是 biological parents， 换句话说，在生物学里面，你们的确是父母子女的关系，可是它加一个 non， N-O-N， 这个就相当于中文的非，也就是非亲生的。那这边还有另外一个细节，就是在 non-biological brothers 后面的逗点接着写 one of whom。One of whom， 我们要知道这个句型非常的重要，在英文里面我们看到逗点，然后接着关系子句，当然一定是非限定用法。那如果你看到一些所谓的不定代名词，像 one, several, both, all, none, a few 等等，或是 some 这些不定代名词后面再接 of， 然后再接冠带，像受格就用 whom， 如果用 which 那就是非人。好，这种说法就是前面先行词当中的一个，或是好几个，或是两个都是，或是全部都是。好，接在这里这样子的用法要特别留意。
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue talking about this Japanese truck driver who actually won a lawsuit. He got 32 million NT dollars. No, actually 32 million yen. And that was because he got switched in the crib when he was a kid. It was a mistake, of course, but he was compensated with this money. And we're also talking about how these babies lived contrasting lives. Okay, so he was a truck driver living in a poor family.And now he has to take care of one of his brothers who has had a stroke. Now, meanwhile, the baby that took his place lived a privileged life. Okay, so that's the baby that he was switched with. The baby that was supposed to be the baby of the mother who lived in a one-room apartment. He actually lived a privileged life. If something is privileged or if you live a privileged life, that means you have special rights, you have advantages, you get things that other people don't. Usually it just means that you live a life of luxury.
Yeah, they have plenty of money and they can afford to do things that most normal people can't afford. The truck driver's biological family, for example, was wealthy enough to afford, if you can afford something, you have enough money to pay for it. They could afford private tutors. Now, a lot of people will have tutors for different things. Sounds like they didn't even have to go to a school, like a public school or even a private school. They had their own tutors who would come to their house and teach them there. I had a tutor for Chinese, but this is different. Sometimes you'll have someone who can help you with math or English or even music lessons, but here sounded like they didn't even have to go to a school. They had their teacher come to their home and teach them there. So that's kind of a nice little luxury they had growing up.Indeed.
And tutors are people you hire to help you if you're not really doing well in school. And also, they could afford other luxuries like, fancy bags from Gucci or something like that, or a chauffeur-driven limousine, vacations down to nice beaches in Indonesia and stuff like that when it gets cold in Japan, stuff like that. So they had all these other luxuries, which, of course, are things you don't really need in life, but if you have them, it makes your life more comfortable. And, of course, you can brag to other people and say, hey, I've got this kind of stuff. Aren't I special?Aren't we rich here? And, well, here it's a 60-year-old error. So the 60-year-old error or mistake was discovered when the truck driver's real brothers called for a DNA test on their elder brother after their parents died. So they wouldn't have known this was the case unless these brothers from the other family decided, we're going to have a DNA test for our elder brother. If you call for something, that means you make a request for this thing, or you want it to be done. You tell someone that you want this done. Candidates for president call for changes in society. I'm calling for a reduction in taxes, or I'm calling for more police to stop crime. In this case here, though, they called for a DNA test. They requested it.Yeah, our elder brother, we want to have a test on him. We love him, we grew up with him and stuff like that, but there's something not quite right here.
Yeah, he doesn't look like us at all. His personality is completely different. But they waited until after their parents died. They didn't want their mom or dad to suffer knowing that they had raised the wrong child. And they probably would wonder where their real son was. Of course, they love the elder brother because they grew up together.
Well, it doesn't really say. Maybe they had, family squabbles, fights and stuff.
They could have,
Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe they're fighting over the inheritance. That does happen in rich families.
Oh, a lot. Now, the younger brothers, it says here, they had been suspicious. as their elder brother looked nothing like them. If you're suspicious of somebody, it just means you don't really trust them. You know, you kind of have this feeling like they can't be trusted, so it's this cautious distrust of someone or something. You could be suspicious of someone's motives, why they're doing what they're doing. Here they were suspicious. They kind of had a feeling that, you know, something's not quite right here. He doesn't look like us. He doesn't seem to be anything like our mom and dad or even us. So they waited, though, out of respect for their parents to test or find out if their brother was a real brother. They wanted to test the DNA, but they waited until after their parents had passed away and they were gone.
Right, so I guess that's something they thought that would upset their parents or something, so they decided, well, if we ask for that DNA test, maybe mom and dad will kind of be upset by that. And of course, children in Japan have high respect for their elders, so they decided to wait until their parents had passed away, until after they had croaked, till they had punched out, until after they had bought the farm.
Okay, those last three phrases that Tom used aren't very nice. So only use them to joke. Do not use them to talk about.
There are different ways to say someone has kicked the bucket.
Kick the bucket, yeah.
But in any case here, yes, they waited until they passed away. That's the most polite way to say that. Now, upon learning the truth, or when he learned the truth, the truck driver was astonished. To be astonished here just means to be extremely surprised, usually when it happens very suddenly. I'm astonished. Wow, I'm astonished that you were able to get 100 points on the test. I thought you were an idiot. I thought you were really stupid. I'm astonished that you actually did so well on the test. You surprised me.
That's not very nice.
Well, it's just an example.
Upon learning means as soon as they learned the truth. So as soon as they learned the truth, you know, the truck driver, of course, was astonished. Maybe he fit into his own non-biological family a little better. I'm thinking, Tom, that his real biological brothers, maybe they wanted to test the DNA of the elder brother because they didn't want him to take all the money, all the inheritance. It probably had something to do with money, unfortunately.
I suspect the same thing.
Me too. Well, the truck driver said, I wondered how on earth this could happen. We use that phrase, how on earth, to express a lot of shock or surprise. How on earth did this happen? How on earth did you ruin my dress? You know, he could not imagine how anything like this could happen, but it does happen actually more than you'd think. Seeing photos of his biological parents still makes him cry because he looks at them and he just has a lot of regret. He wishes that he'd been able to meet them because, as we learn, they're both dead at this point and he never got the chance to meet them while they were still alive.
Yeah, that would totally freak me out. Number one, to find out that you were not growing up with your real parents. Yeah. And number two, to find out that your real parents are actually gone. You could never meet them. There can't be some kind of closure on this. You've got to live with this reality for the rest of your life. Yeah, he got some money in compensation, but he's still going to, be having nightmares about this for a long time. And now he's probably going to have to start having these relationships with his biological brothers, who, of course, don't want him to have any of the inheritance. You grew up someplace else as a poor person. We're not going to give you any money when our parents die.
You know what? Though he sued and got a lot of money from the hospital, maybe his real brothers want to get their hands on that, too.
Could be. It's going to be a big legal fight there. But in any case here, he's all in tears because he never got to meet his real biological parents. Now, happily, his biological brothers contacted him and said that they should make up for lost time. So maybe they're not so bad after all. They knew that they had a brother who was switched at birth, so they contacted him. Here, contact as a verb just means to establish communication with somebody.
That's right. You can contact somebody by phone, you can text them, you can write them a snail mail letter, which is by hand, and you send it through the post office. You can contact people a lot of different ways. Well, they got in touch with him. We could say that as well. They got in touch with him and said they wanted to make up for lost time. If you make up for lost time, it means, your time, you missed some opportunities in the past, but now you're doing as much as possible to, get back some of that lost time. You can never get back lost time, but if you have a lot of activities in a short amount of time, we just say, oh, you're making up for lost time.
Make up for. That's different from make up, which could be to come to a decision. I haven't made up my mind yet, but here they want to compensate or make up for lost time. And here's what the man said. He said, I was happy to hear that, and I want to do it. Okay, so he does want to contact his real biological brothers.
Hang out with them, yeah.
Hang out with them and maybe have a little bottle of sake or something and some sushi and
yeah.
whatever. Do the things that people in Japan do and have a good time. And hopefully they won't have any big fights over the inheritance and stuff like that. They'll be brothers until the end of time.
That would be nice. Before we sign off, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time.
好，那我们继续看这命运多舛的这一位卡车司机。那当然，同时你知道，另外一边是被交换的婴儿，他呢反而过着很优渥的生活，而他的家庭因为很有钱，所以还可以让他有家教，可以用奢侈品。而且在这60年当中，他们的真正兄弟也觉得很奇怪，因为这一个兄弟长得跟他们其他小孩真的不同。好，那也是因为他们要求做 DNA 的检测，然后才发现原来真的他们并没有血亲关系。这也就是为什么后来事实的真相大家都知道了。那这一段当然这个交代过程，但是后面最后知道真相以后又怎么样呢？我们就直接来看最后下面这一段就告诉你 Upon learning the truth Upon 这是一个介系词，那upon 后面加上一个动名词，这样放在句首，我们中文就翻成一怎么样。好，一怎么样就怎么样，所以这里 upon learning the truth 就是一知道真相以后。好，那这个卡车司机呢是非常非常的震惊的。我们再来看下面就说了，这样的事情还是很令人遗憾，因为他的亲生父母其实都已经过世了，而没有机会在死前看到父母一面。不过还好，就是他的 biological brothers 这亲生的兄弟呢联络了他，然后呢也希望能弥补这过去失去的时光。我们今天的节目就到这里结束，我们下次见。
Okay, that brings us to the end of our program for today. Hopefully this has not happened to any of you, but remember, hospitals do make mistakes sometimes, and we're going to continue talking about how this might be happening more and more because there are fewer and fewer people who want to enter the medical profession. So until then, until our program next time, from all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.